Hi, in this tutorial we're going to make this Mother's Day scrapbook page, and everything we've used in this page is available in Photoshop Elements, except for the two pictures, of course. Let's get started. Okay, we're going to start with a 12 by 12 inch document. Let's bring in a background. Let's come over here and get our backgrounds panel. Let's find a background. I'm going to use this flower pink background. Sounds like Mother's Day. Let's pull that in. Let's get some type. Let's get our type tool. I'm going to use a script font called Snell Roundhouse Bold. You can use whatever font you want. I'm going to pick a dark pink color. I like this one. I'm going to go with this color. Let's make the size a little bit bigger. If you put your cursor over the word size, it turns into a hand with an arrow going to the left and the right. If you click and drag to the right, that will make your type bigger. We can do the same thing with leading. That's the space between the lines. Let's click up here and see what we've got. I'm going to type Mother's Day 2021. I'm going to make that just a little bit bigger, so I'm going to get my type tool again. Select all that type. Once you click in your type, you can just hit Command A or Control A to select all of that type. Now I'm going to click and drag on the word size to make that the size that I want it. I'm just going to look at it visually. About that big. I like that. Click the check mark. I want to rotate that, so if I move my cursor up here in the corner by these corner squares, these are called handles, my cursor turns into a double-headed curved arrow. Just click and drag and that'll rotate that type. Let's go something like that. Let's drag it down just a little bit. Click the check mark. If I want to change the font, use a different font. Let's get that type tool back again. Select all that type. You can select your font down here. You can use your up and down arrow keys to cycle through the different fonts that you have available on your computer. I'm going to stick with Snell Roundhand. Click the check mark. I want to put some layer styles on that, so let's come up under Layer, Layer Style, Style Settings. Let's put a drop shadow on this. This style determines the direction of the light. I like the light coming from the upper left. That puts the shadow down here on the lower right. Click on the drop shadow. Distance determines the distance from our type that the drop shadow is going to come in. That's a little too far. Let's go back. Something like that. Size determines how sharp or how hard the shadow is. There's a hard shadow. If you drag this slider to the right, it becomes a soft shadow. Let's make it about not too hard, but not too soft. Something like that. I like that. Let's change the opacity. This will make the shadow a little bit darker. Let's just go up a little ways. Let's go something like that. Let's put a little stroke around it. Click on the stroke. We got black. I think that's nice. Let's make this stroke a little bit bigger. And just visually, I'm going to say right around there, 7 pixels. That looks good. Click OK. Okay, let's bring in our pictures. I have some pictures open down here. Click on our photo bin. Let's bring in our pictures. Let's bring in this picture. Let's drag it down here to the corner a little bit. Let's rotate it the same way we did that type. Put our cursor up here in the corner and click and drag to rotate it. Let's bring in our other picture. We'll drag it down here to the other corner and we'll rotate it just a little bit in the opposite direction. Let's just change the position a little bit, get them where we want them, where it looks good. Click the check mark. Let's slide this one up just a little bit more. Something like that. I like that. Let's put a frame around our pictures. Over here in the Shapes panel, you have a lot of different frames that you can use. But I like to make my own, and we can do that by using layer styles. Make sure one of your picture layers is selected, and Command click or Control click if you're on a PC on that layer, and that will make a selection of everything on that layer. In this case, it makes a selection of our picture. Let's make a new layer, and it'll come in right above that picture. Come up under Edit and choose Stroke the Selection. Now we want a color. I'm going to pick a color. If you click on that color swatch, it opens the color picker. I'm going to pick a teal color. Something maybe like that. Click OK. 50 pixels is good. I want my line, my stroke to be on the inside. That will keep these corners nice and sharp. If you go to the outside, it will round off those corners. Your stroke will go from your selection out. Because I'm clicked on inside, my stroke will come from the selection in. It's going to cut off a little bit of her hair, but I think that's okay. I like the idea of having the square corners. So let's just click OK. And there's our border, or our frame. Now let's put a layer style on that frame. Come up under Layer, Layer Style, Style Settings. Click on Drop Shadow, and we'll just change these settings so that it looks kind of like the other drop shadow that we already have. We could go back to the Mother's Day layer styles and get the exact numbers, but we can just visually look at it, and I think it'll be okay. And because we have our frame on a separate layer, it puts that shadow in here too. Makes it a little more believable. It looks like a real frame. This will also make it a little more realistic by adding a bevel. This gives it a 3D effect or an embossed effect. It makes it look a little more realistic. Let's not go too far. Let's make it something about like that. Perfect. I like that. Click OK. Now let's do the same thing around this other picture. Select the picture layer, then Command click or Control click if you're on a PC on that layer. That makes the selection around the picture. Make a new layer right above our picture layer. Let's come up under Edit, Stroke Selection. We still have all the same settings in there, so just click OK. Now let's copy those effects or those layer styles to this frame. Hold down the Option on a Mac or the Alt on a PC and click on this FX and drag it down to our other frame layer. And that copies that layer style to our other frame. Perfect. I like that. Let's bring in another graphic. Let's go back to our graphics panel. I'm going to bring in this graphic. Journaling tags. Let's bring that in. We'll make it a little bit bigger and move it into position. Something like that. Click the check mark. Now I'm going to put some attributes of Mother in each one of these tags. So let's get our type tool. I think I'll go ahead and use this same blue color, but we're going to make this a little bit smaller. Let's just drag on the word size, make it smaller. I'm not sure how small we're going to go. Let's just click up here and we'll start typing love. A mother is all about love. Let's double click on that type. I want this to be a basic font, not the script font. So I'm going to choose Arial Bold. That's something that almost everybody has on their computer, whether it's a Mac or a PC, you should have Arial. Size is still a little small, so I'm going to drag this to the right just a little bit. About there, I'm just visually looking at it. Click the check mark. Now I want to rotate that a little bit since our tag is rotated. So come up here and we'll just rotate that the same way we did everything else. We'll get it going about the same angle as that tag. Now we can use our arrow keys to fine-tune that position. If we click once on the arrow key, it'll move 1 pixel. If we hold down the shift and click on the arrow key, it will move 10 pixels in whichever direction the arrow is pointing. We'll just kind of center that in that tag. Perfect. I like that. Let's just make a copy of this love layer. Command J or Control J makes a copy. We've got our move tool. Let's just slide that down to our next tag. Let's get the type tool. Triple click on our type to select the type. We'll type in beautiful. Mothers are beautiful. Click the check mark. You can rotate that around. Perfect. Let's use our arrow keys to nudge it into position. Looks like we're a little bit crooked still. Okay, I think that looks good. Click the check mark. Let's do the same thing. Copy that. Command J or Control J. Move that down here. Get our type tool. Triple click in our type. We'll type in teacher. Mothers are teachers. Let's rotate that. And use the arrow keys to nudge it into position. Command J or Control J on a PC to copy that layer. Let's move it down. Get the type tool. Let's type in kind. Mothers are kind. Let's click the check mark. Let's rotate that a little bit. Oh, sometimes you get something like that where it will scale it. Even though you have the double curved arrow, it'll scale it rather than rotate it. Just click on the cancel and let's try it again. Now it did it again. Click cancel. Let's try it one more time. And it did it again. Click cancel. If it continues to do that, you can move your cursor up to the corner. When you get the curved arrow, just click but don't drag. Down here in the options, you'll get this angle dial. You can just click on this angle dial and you can rotate it from there. It's a little more clunky, but it works. You can also just type in a number down here if you want. If we're close but not quite close, let's just type in 10 and click the check mark. I think that looks pretty good. Let's use our arrow keys. Perfect. Okay, one more time. Command J or Control J. Let's drag that down. Mothers are patient. I know my mother was patient. Click the check mark. Let's rotate that one. Let's see if it'll rotate this time. Yep, worked this time. Okay, perfect. Let's use the arrow keys to nudge it into position. Okay, now I want to put some lines in here for some journaling. So let's get the type tool. See how my cursor is just a little I-beam, but if I move it over here, it gets a little square around it. If I click on it when it doesn't have that square, it's going to select that Mother's Day type. So I need to move it so that that gets that little square around my cursor. I want to come down a little bit. I want to make sure, I'm looking at my rulers up here, I want to come in about 1 inch. And if you can't see your rulers, come up under View, Rulers. There's rulers right there, and there's your keyboard shortcut. That will toggle your rulers on and off. So I want to come down here about 1 inch in and make sure I have that square around my cursor. And I'm just going to drag out a box, and this is going to be my text box. Now I want to make this black type, so let's click on our color swatch down here and we'll choose black. Let's make this size a little bit smaller. Let's go about 12 point or 15 point, that's fine. Leading is the space between our lines. We want to have a little bit of space there to be able to write. Let's go about 35. That should be fine. Let's click up here in our text box and we'll just type some lines. Hold down the Shift and push the underscore button. You can type in your journaling if you want, or you can just put in the lines. If you put in the lines, then after you print your scrapbook page, you can actually write in your own handwriting your journaling, and it makes it a little more personal. Okay, click the check mark. Now I want to put a little border type graphic down here across the bottom. So I'm going to go back to my shapes. I like this border. Let's bring it in. If we copy this, this edge will line up with this edge and you can make a border all the way across. So let's do that. Let's slide that down a little bit though in position, a little closer to position. Okay, let's just copy that. With that layer selected, hit Command J or Control J. That makes a copy. If you hold down the Shift, you can move that. It'll move straight across. It'll line up with the right edge of our first one. Let's zoom in a little bit. Let's grab the zoom tool. Zoom in. You can see we need to move it just a little teeny bit. Let's get our move tool. And we'll just click once on our left arrow key. Okay, let's deselect that, see how it lines up. Pretty good, I like that. Command 0 to zoom back out. Let's do it again. Click on that second layer that we made. Command J or Control J to make a copy. Hold down the Shift, slide that over. Let's zoom in. Get the zoom tool, zoom in. Get the move tool. Let's do one click over. Yep, I think that'll work. Command 0 or Control 0 to zoom back out. Now let's combine all three of those layers together. Select all three of those layers, select the top one, hold down the Shift and select the bottom one. So we've got all three of those border layers selected. Hit Command E or Control E. We'll merge them all into one layer. Now let's copy that layer. Command J or Control J copies that layer. Come over here to the left-hand side, hold down the Shift, and let's drag it on over. And we'll make that line up. the zoom tool, zoom in. Let's get the move tool. Looks like you can see it. We got to move it just a little teeny bit. Let's make sure we're on that layer. This layer up here. Hit the left arrow key. I'll move it over just a little bit. Let's deselect it. And perfect. Command 0 to zoom back out, or Control 0. Let's select both of those layers and merge them together. Command E or Control E. Now that's all one piece, and we can move that around wherever we want. And because it's longer than our 12 inches, we can move it side to side and get it positioned the way that we want it. I'm going to put it right there. I like that, but I want that to be at the bottom. I want that to be right above our background layer. So just click on this layer and hold down the mouse button and drag, and we'll go all the way down right above our background layer. You can see the line between our layers gets dark, thick, and black. Let's just drop it right there. Now it's behind everything. I like that. I don't want this to be black. I want it to be the same color as Mother's Day, this dark pink color. And I can do that with the solid color fill layer. Make sure that the border layer is selected, and let's come up and make a solid fill layer. The color picker opens up, and if we move our cursor up into our artwork, it turns into an eyedropper. We can just click on that pink color, and that will become our new foreground color. It made our whole background pink. We don't want that. We just want that pink to affect our border. We can do that by clipping that pink layer to our border layer. That means the color will only appear where there are pixels on our border layer. You can do that by holding down the Option or the Alt on a PC and moving your cursor right in between those two layers. And when your cursor becomes a square with an arrow pointing down, click right there, and that color will only be applied to our border layer. And I think that looks pretty good. I like that. Click on the border layer, and let's put a layer style on that. Let's come up under Layer, Layer Style, Style Settings. Let's put on a drop shadow. Let's give it a little bit of distance. Let's make it a little softer and a little bit darker. You may like that, but I don't really like the drop shadow going in these leaves and in these stems. It looks like the leaves are cut out. Let's hit Cancel. Let's do something different here. Let's make a selection of that border layer. You can do that by holding down the Control on a PC or the Command on a Mac and clicking right on that layer, and that will select everything on that layer. It also selected all the leaves and the stems, and I don't want to do that. I just want one solid border across there. So I can do that by adding to that selection. Let's grab our marquee tool up here, rectangular marquee. Let's zoom in just a little bit, Command and the plus sign. Hold down the spacebar and you get the hand and you can move your artwork around. Let's enlarge it one more time with the Command and the plus sign, or Control and the plus sign. With our marquee tool selected, if you hold down the Shift, it will add to our selection. Look at our cursor. It has a little plus sign down in the lower right-hand corner. That means it was going to add to the selection. So with your marquee tool selected and hold down the Shift, place your cursor right up here in the upper left-hand corner of your selection. Make sure you're within the current selection and click and drag down to the lower right-hand corner of the selection. Again, make sure that you're within the current selection and let go, and that will make a selection of that whole border area, including the leaves and the stems. Let's hit Command 0 or Control 0 to zoom back out. Let's make a new layer. The new layer button up here. I don't want this to be clipped to our border layer, so let's just drag it down below the border layer. Click on that layer and drag it down below our border layer. Now it's not clipped anymore, and it's underneath, which is what we want. Hit Shift Delete or Shift Backspace, and that brings up the Fill Layer dialog box. Let's just pick white. You can pick anything there you want, but we'll click white. Click OK, and that filled that selection with white. Now we can give that a layer style. Hit Command D or Control D to deselect all of that. Let's go up under Layer, Layer Style, Style Settings. Let's just give this a black stroke. Let's click on Stroke. Let's just move this slider until we get what we like. I'm just going to leave it at 10 pixels. That looks good. Click OK. Okay, the last thing I want to do is bring in some flowers. So let's go back to the graphics panel. And I like these flowers right here, the daisies. Let's bring some daisies in. Let's make it a little bit smaller. We'll move it down here just a little bit. Click the check mark. Let's put a drop shadow on that daisy. Go up under Layer, Layer Style, Style Settings. Just click on drop shadow. Let's move these sliders around until I get the drop shadow I want. Okay, something like that. Click OK. I'm going to copy that flower so I have more than one. Select the flower layer and Command J or Control J if you're on a PC will make a copy of that flower layer. We'll move it over here. We'll make this one a little bit smaller. Just click and drag on one of these corner squares, these are called handles, to resize that flower. Click the check mark to accept that. Command J or Control J on that layer to make another copy. Click on it and drag it down into position. Command J or Control J to duplicate it again, and we'll move this one over to this other side. And one more. Command J or Control J. Move this down here. We'll make this one just a little bit bigger, just to give it a little bit of variety. Let's click the check mark. I want the word Mother's Day to be right on the top. Let's come down here and grab the Mother's Day layer and drag it right up to the top. And there we go. Now you can take a look at it and decide if you want to move something around. Fine-tune your composition. I think I'm going to move these tags down just a little bit. The easiest way to do that is to put those in a group. So I'm going to select all of the type layers and the tag layer. So there's the word patient. I'm going to hold the shift key down. Kind, teacher, beautiful, love, and our tags. Command G or Control G will put them in a group, or I could just hit this group icon right here. I'm going to call this tags, and now I can move those around as a group. I'm just going to move them a little bit here. Something like that. I like that. Now I'm going to save this as a Photoshop document, a PSD. That'll save all of these layers. If I ever want to go back in and make any changes, I can do that because I'll have those layers. But then I'm going to flatten it and save a copy as a JPEG. That JPEG is the one that I'm going to use to print from. That's the tutorial for today. I hope that you've learned something new. If you have, don't forget to subscribe. And I'll see you in the next tutorial. Thanks. Bye.